It's all happening at the DA Federal Congress, which is currently underway in Midrand. A few moments ago, we heard from John Steenhuisen and Mpho Phago, who are up on stage putting up their pictures ahead of voting, which is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Well, our team is out at Midrand. Stephen Grootes joins us now, and we cross live to him for what's happening on the ground. Stephen, good afternoon.
Page 85.
Hugo, thank you very much indeed. Good afternoon to you. Well, plenty happening at the moment, going through various amendments. You see the red card if people are voting in favour of a constitutional change. A green card, well, there's no football equivalent of a green card, but I'm fairly certain Hugo Bruce would never get one. Plenty, of course, to talk about this afternoon, particularly after those speeches, Hugo, as you say, by the two leadership candidates. Professor Kedibone Phago, still with us this afternoon, Director of the School of Government at the University of North West. Professor Phago, firstly, I don't know of any other political party which will allow two candidates for the position of leader to actually go in public, on live television, on Newzroom Afrika channel 405 no less, and speak in front of their delegates in the way that the Democratic Alliance did. What does that tell us about this party and other parties?
Thanks, Stephen. I think this is quite a very good way of, just after all the campaigning and the running around looking for votes, to finally say, look, this is where I am now in terms of my posturing, in terms of my presentation. So please, this is my final kick, and I'm here to stay, and this is my position. So I think this gives us a very good indication that there is an internal democracy at play, and people are given an opportunity to really come and contest, because this is a contestation, and contest in a manner that is respectful but very robust at the same time. So it's quite impressive.
It's hard to do, isn't it? Because in all political parties, in all democracies, your biggest rivals are usually the people in your party, right? And Mbeki, Zuma, Ramaphosa, I mean, Zuma and plenty of people, but still. So the point I'm trying to make is that you've got to actually be quite careful how you do it. I mean, there was a snipe there, qualifications. I mean, Mpho Phago was having a snipe at John Steenhuisen. She's a doctor, he's got a trick.
I think you're very correct. But I think both candidates were, in my view, very persuasive, and they had their pitch very well articulated, and they were very well positioned. And of course, my thinking is that Mpho is presenting her credentials, very critical medical record, but also over and above that, she's actually saying that I have an experience in governance, and I think she used those words. But I think she's actually trying to say that John Steenhuisen does not have experience in government that we are aware of, and if he becomes the president, he may be challenged in one form or the other. So she is actually saying, I've been in government in Joburg, and I know how to handle these kind of dynamics by myself. And so I feel her talk was more of a direct rebuttal, if you may, to John Steenhuisen's presentation.
It's also interesting just to see how these things play out, because in leadership elections, very few people anywhere in the world are given the chance to speak for 5 minutes uncensored. You know, you won't hear it on talk radio. You won't. No one sitting in your chair is going to get 5 minutes without me butting in. The point I'm trying to get is, here you have, no matter what happens to John Steenhuisen or Mpho Phago from now, they've had quite a big stage to express themselves, to sort of make a mark, you know. In other politics, the order of speakers is really heavily contested. People fight behind the scenes for who's going to speak when. This is uncensored 5 minutes. You can say whatever you want. I mean, it's quite a moment, isn't it?
And I think it should be like that. It should be like that because this is a big stage. The position they are contesting, it's a very important position for the DA, and that can actually either set the course of the DA trajectory positively or negatively. So you really want to make sure that the people that are contesting the space are actually up to the task itself. So this is an opportunity for them to demonstrate that they can articulate issues. This is a leadership position where they need to be able to say, this is wrong, this is right, let's head this direction. So I think many political parties can actually learn out of this, that you don't only lead because you have experience in government or in leadership, but you must also be able to articulate your views and your ideas so that they are very well understood.
So different political parties, they have different strands and different factions or different groups. For the moment, I think we use the word factions, but throughout political history there have been changes. And I remember in 2007, a week before the Polokwane ANC conference, Jacob Zuma gave a speech at Wits University, and he said, we need to declare a state of emergency on AIDS and crime. And he was setting himself very apart from Thabo Mbeki, who had denied that crime was a serious problem, and we know where Mbeki was, and still holds unscientific and wrong views on HIV. So Zuma was using that moment to set out his stage. The Democratic Alliance doesn't have quite the same ideological spectrum as the ANC. I would argue that the ideological spectrum may be a bit narrower, despite its greater diversity. So maybe I'm going to contradict myself, I'm not sure yet. So what I'm trying to get to is it actually quite hard in the DA to set yourself apart from your contestant?
Yes, and I think it's important because the question of leadership, it's not necessarily about an individual, but it's about organization, it's about institution. And if you don't have sufficient political maturity and understanding to know that I may have personal differences with my contestant, and the challenge is, how do you rise above that and position party policy better than personal differences? It's normal to have personal differences. We are human beings, we have got differences. So the most important thing, element for me that demonstrates maturity is someone should rise above the personality and even personal preferences and say what is good for our organization that can actually make it more sustainable and even more successful.
It's quite difficult to do, isn't it, to rise above the sort of internal stuff in a party?
Yes, if you have been, scratched too much, sometimes it becomes, a personal thing, like what we see generally in the ANC, as you have indicated about Jacob Zuma and Thabo Mbeki in particular. So you will see that their squabbles were just way too personal, and they paralyzed the party. So what we see currently in the ANC, the majority of that is as a result of that paralysis. So you need to have leaders that would internalize it, that the organization must outlive their being part of the party itself. And that actually, for me, should serve as a very important characterization of maturity in deserving whether one wants to be a leader or not.
John Steenhuisen focused in his speech on bringing the ANC below 50%. And I mean, obviously, any leader of a Democratic Alliance is going to say that, and that is an entirely legitimate aim, I suppose. It's very different to say this is what should happen. Anyone can say that. Making it happen is very, very difficult. Sure, I think if the Democratic Alliance makes load shedding the critical issue of next year's election, that probably helps them and damages the ANC. But it's still quite hard to see a path to that. And I wondered if maybe both he and Palatse maybe needed to do a little bit more fleshing out of the details. Sure, bring the ANC below 50%. Okay, that still means, DA, you have to enter a coalition with Julius Malema, and let's see how that plays out. But what I'm trying to get to is, like, how you do this. It's actually very hard to do without making this conference all about the ANC, which it shouldn't be.
Well, we have to talk about the ANC because it's the party in government, and the DA is the biggest opposition. So it's quite a very relevant conversation. But my take, especially with John Steenhuisen's talk, is that he sees this bring ANC under 50% as a low-hanging fruit, because if you observe the trajectory of the election outcomes for the past few years, it has been very clear that ANC is in a steep decline, and the previous local government elections, I think they've got around just a little below 53%. from 57%, the previous national election. So this tells you that ANC is much likely to go below 50% if the prevailing circumstances will be the order of the day at that point. I'm just not sure if they can go below 40%.
Sure.
Because what we have seen during local government elections, the recent ones, last year, 2021, local government elections, is that ANC has become very much entrenched in the rural areas. And that has, in a way characterized it more like a rural political party. And there is a lot of contestation in urban centers, towns and cities in South Africa that actually say that we are much likely to see more coalitions, and that means ANC will be losing a lot of power. So, but I'm not sure if it will go 40%, below 40% during this coming election. So I agree with you on that point, Stephen.
The fact someone's even thinking of 40% for the ANC tells us how fluid our politics is. It says quite a lot.
Yeah.
So the contest between Palatse and Steenhuisen, right? I think many people before the 2021 a local election, and before the DA said she would be our candidate for the mayor of Joburg, probably hadn't heard of her. She was, of course, a member of the mayoral committee under Herman Mashaba, and maybe we'll work with him again, who knows. What I'm trying to get to is that deep roots in a party, in a leadership contest, how important is that? And is that Steenhuisen's probable big advantage in this?
So that really positions John Steenhuisen a lot, because being in an organization also helps one for institutional memory. In other words, you remember why certain decisions have been made and in the way they've been made. So when there are changes, you can actually follow through. But when you are new, like Palatse, in the organization, and you are quickly parachuted to leadership positions, you tend to not really see what rank and file members see, and it takes time to understand their frustrations and their views, and that can actually alienate your position when it comes to leadership. But I think for now we can just give it to Mpo that she has run a very solid campaign, and I think it's in the DA's membership tomorrow to make a decision.
I noticed there was no prediction from the good professor there. All right, Professor Kedibone Phago, thank you. We'll continue with conversations around this. A lot more to come from the Democratic Alliance Conference, live here, of course, from Midrand, from Gallagher Estate.